Welcome to the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. I'm Kevin C. Neese.
And I'm Tim Van Orden, and this is Episode 5, New Old Eden. We'll be starting off with some Star Trek news about commanding your own starship, and then discussing Lower Decks Season 1, Episode 7, Much Ado About Boimler.
And then we'll respond to an audience question right after we get into our main topic, which is Season 2, Episode 2 of Discovery, the episode New Eden. People have been bugging me to get into this, and I'm going to do it, because that's how we do things around here. Come and join us. Well, you know, some days the episode starts just smoothly and easily, and other days it starts kind of slowly and after several takes. And the great part about doing it the way we do it is the audience doesn't know which they're listening to. So let that mystery rest in your minds, audience at home. How are you doing, Tim?
I'm doing all right, thanks. How are you?
I'm making it. I'm doing okay. It's been a pretty good day. It's been doing all right.
Very good.
So I rewatched some Star Trek for our episode this week, which was nice. It was good to get to go back and do this episode.
It's a good episode to rewatch.
Yeah, it's cool. Shall we get into some Star Trek news?
Let's do it. I'm eager to hear about commanding my own starship.
I know. Didn't I make that sound awesome?
You did. Except
I know.
I was the one that made it.
Well, that's true. I mean, you did read it. I did write it,
that's
but
right.
You did read it. Because we're a team like that. It's as usual not as awesome as it sounds. But are you familiar with a video game called Star Trek Bridge Crew?
Yeah, it's a virtual reality game, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do PS4 and like PC and whatever, mm-hmm. and totally. By the way, this is totally hashtag not spawn. This is just a thing that I discovered because I'm looking for video games for my son, and
it's been around for a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, no, I mean, no, I know about the game.
Oh, okay.
I didn't just discover the game. I discovered the news about it. It's really cool. Like I remember imagining years ago a similar kind of game. I still have a similar game in my head that is not this, because it is kind of largely a ship battle kind of game. Mm-hmm. But it's cool because you can play online and you can work with your friends and you can be in different stations and you're communicating. And I did a thing like this. A couple of years ago at a convention. I can't remember which convention, and I was a captain. It was a similar game. It wasn't this game. It was a similar game, but it was live. It was in a room, and we were all there. We had our different stations, and it was a lot of fun. Even though the game itself was kind of irritating, because it was constantly like, you have to turn around and go do this. Now you have to go do this. I mean, you couldn't accomplish anything because the game was constantly telling you there was something else you had to do. But that's not this game. It's a different game. But that's what I played, and it was fun, even though it was annoying. And so Star Trek Bridge Crew looks even cooler because it doesn't look as annoying. But if you have ever been on the fence about that, if you're aware of that game, you're kind of been like, I don't know if I want to drop, the money for the game. It is currently on sale for $750, which is a really good price.
Considering the hundreds of dollars you have to shell out for VR equipment.
Well, if you have the equipment, and I think you can play it without the VR equipment, honestly. I think you can do it just on PC. I'm not sure, but I think you can. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It says available for play with VR headsets and without. So you could do this on PC. You could do this on PS4. It's from Ubisoft, and if you go to the Ubisoft website, they're selling it now for like $750. I think it's normally like $25, $30, something like that. So it's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, if you happen to be listening to us on September 18th of 2020.
That's true. Because you have about 12 days. I mean, it's through the end of the month.
Right.
So, yeah, but that's the cool thing. Hey, news is always timely, sir.
Oh, except by the time someone is hearing this, it's going to be what, 21st of September?
All right, so you have a week. But it's kind of cool. I just thought it was cool that was up there, and I know some people have kind of said, well, I don't know if I want to buy it or not, but anyway, you can.
No, that is pretty cool.
It's pretty cheap, and they've got a TNG upgrade that you can do to it for the same price. So you can be on the bridge of the Enterprise.
Yeah, I'd kind of much rather be on a TNG bridge.
Yeah, it's cool. Like the original game, they have like a Kelvin timeline style bridge.
Okay.
But they also have an original series bridge. Those are both in the original game, and then they also have this add-on where you can do a TNG bridge. So it's kind of cool.
I cannot wait to see more of the Enterprise bridge in Strange New Worlds.
Oh, I know.
I am
Oh,
dying to see that, and the uniforms and
so
everything. I
beautiful.
cannot wait to see all that stuff.
Everything about it is so beautiful.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing.
That's one of those things, and I liken it to when Picard was announced, but I almost maybe even more excited about it. I'm beside myself with joy every time I think about Strange New Worlds, which I'm a little worried about because I try not to go into things with expectations, as you know,
Yeah,
because I
yeah.
think that's the worst thing you can do.
I think
Because
I definitely have expectations for this.
yeah, yeah.
So
Well, the thing is, we feel like we've already seen like a backdoor pilot, right?
right.
So there's that sense
Like
that we kind of have an idea what the show's going
I
to be like. And
I think it was on that. I know it was. I can't remember who said it on that Star Trek Day Strange New Worlds panel that I
mm-hmm.
watched.
Yeah.
I can't remember which one of them said it, but it was like if you count the cage,
Yeah.
this is like the longest pilot to show.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Let's see. The cage was 64. So what is it, like 56 years? Yeah, 56 years from pilot to green light. Somebody tweeted that, I think, right after that was announced. I thought that was pretty great. Yep.
Nice.
Yep. So that leads, actually, you didn't even know you were doing this, but you're totally setting up my next bit of Star Trek news, which is kind of old news at this point, but I just want to make sure it's out there. If you missed the Star Trek Day festivities, all that stuff is still available, like all the panels and stuff. They're on
Oh yeah, on
YouTube,
YouTube.
and I think they're on StarTrek.com too. One or the other, or both. I will put links in the description, but I just want our audience to know that that's there, and go check it out because it's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's one other thing that you need to check out because it's cool, which is, a couple of weeks ago we had David Atwell on here talking about Trektember over at Real
Not
World Theology.
not to be confused with David Attenborough.
Not to be confused with David Attenborough. That's true. They
I
are.
was really excited at first when I saw that name. I got a little confused, and I'm like, "Holy crap! How did you land Attenborough?"
Oh boy. Yeah. No, not to be spared no expense, to quote his brother. But yeah. So I talked about David Atwell last couple of weeks. We talked with David, and you can go back and listen to that episode, Talking Trektember. If you haven't yet, it's our third episode. It's really cool. But I did write a piece. I did actually get a piece published for this year's Trektember,
Oh, hey, cool.
and it's up now. I will put a link to that in the description as well. It is called Terraforming the Human Soul, and I really like this piece. It's actually an abbreviated version, an edited, sort of curated version of a piece that I wrote for a book that I co-edited with my friend Mark Boone, called Science Fiction and the Abolition of Man: Finding C.S. Lewis in Sci-Fi Television and Film.
Oh, very
And
cool. I may actually have to read this one.
Yeah, you should. It's it's really good. It's right up your street. It's sci-fi and C.S. Lewis, two of your favorite things, plus me, three of your favorite things. I mean, come on.
What more can you ask for?
What more can you ask for? But what I did was I kind of made a slightly more blog-friendly version. David is going with a longer format this year for the articles. There are fewer articles and they're longer, and it's all around this theme: new life, new civilizations. Which, in addition to discovering that I don't do very well with broad writing prompts, this this opened up the idea to go into this with David and kind of streamline it a little bit for the website, which is kind of cool in itself, just to try to revisit this piece and sort of give some new life to it. And what it does is it talks about terraforming and the ethics, it's terraforming and the ethical cultural, terraforming and the ethical cultural. Goodness, I can talk. Terraforming and the ethical cultivation of creation is part of the subtitle in the book.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, and apparently not. And so it talks about the Genesis device and David Marcus and his sort of process, the process his character goes through in Star Trek 3, and what Star Trek says about terraforming with regard to the Genesis planet, the Genesis device, because that's kind of Star Trek's biggest statement on terraforming right there. But then it also puts that in conversation with the TNG episode Home Soil, which, as you'll remember, is the one where they find the little silicon-based life forms that are living in the sand on this planet that was going to be terraformed. And you remember the thing that always tells people what episode I'm talking about is when I said it's when they have the little thing in the bell jar that says "ugly giant bags of mostly water," like,
Right.
and everybody goes, "Oh yeah, I remember that episode," right? But it puts those things in conversation and talks about it from from a Christian view of cultivating creation, and it's cool. Go check it out. It'll be in the description. So.
It's also, it just reminded me, have you heard about speaking of finding the silicone life forms is what reminded me. Did you hear the news about Venus?
No.
Have you haven't? This
No.
isn't like a joke or anything. Let me, because I'm going to get the...
It's great. It's great that you said that, because I honestly... and it's basically
there was an old man from Venus.
It's basically just because I know you. Like, whenever you start saying something like that, there is that thing in the back of my mind, like, is this a joke?
Oh, yeah. No, I totally...
Although last week...
Which is why I felt like I needed to let you know that.
Right. Although last week with the Yoda's last name thing, you totally had me going on that for some reason. I just bought into it. So
nice.
That was great.
No, apparently astronomers have seen some signals in the clouds on Venus. They've detected some gas that shouldn't be there in the amount that it is if it wasn't being produced by some sort of living organism.
Oh, come on. Come on. Seriously?
Yeah, seriously.
Huh.
Like, everyone else who's listening to this is probably like knows exactly what I'm talking about, and they're all shaking their head at you right now.
Right. And I'm just thinking about...
I've got an article from the New York Times. I'll send that to you, and you can include that in the link. Okay.
See, I have trouble with these astronomical news items, because they tend to be kind of wildly speculative in all honesty.
Oh yeah, so, there's no one saying that they actually have discovered life in the upper atmosphere of Venus. What they're saying is that it's either going to be life that has produced this gas, or it's some sort of geological process that is completely unknown to science right now.
Fascinating. I am raising my eyebrow assertively. That's cool. That's exciting. Well, let's talk about potential life in the not potential life, but very strange forms of life in the new episode of Lower Decks.
Right.
Yeah. How'd you find Much Ado About Boimler?
Gosh, if I knew enough Shakespeare, I'd make a Shakespeare joke right now. Alas, I do not. I don't know. It was all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get any guffaws out of it. It did. I think I laughed through my nose a couple of times.
Wasn't as cool. You said that about the past couple of episodes, I think.
Yeah, I'm noticing a trend.
Okay. Well, that's disappointing. Well, I will say I thought it was cool because the as you mentioned, the title is like the first real Shakespeare reference, I think, in the series, apart from actually mentioning Shakespeare himself in the last episode.
Yeah, the holiday.
Yeah, but it is the first first proper Shakespeare reference. So, that's good. That earns some Star Trek cred right there.
Check off that box, right?
Hi, Captain. Check off. Okay, get it. Check off that box.
Hey,
that's pretty good, huh?
Yeah. Well,
no, it'd be good if it was a better Chekhov impression. But
this is true.
I actually liked this episode.
Okay, glad to hear that.
Because I felt like there was more of a Star Trek story going on, which is not something I have to have from Lower Decks. I liked the music. I think when it was when the ship was being overtaken by the life form, and they sort of recapitulated the Cerritos, the last the Lower Decks theme. They recapitulated the Lower Decks theme, which I mentioned my fondness for last week. I really like that. I really like that theme. I enjoy it.
Yeah, I realized earlier it had gotten stuck in my head a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's cool. I mean, I think the past couple of series, even though I love Jeff Russo's themes, and Discovery will get stuck in my head. Well, they'll both get stuck in my head sometimes when I'm actually watching the
Picard's
series.
got a good melody in the theme song.
Mm-hmm.
Discovery sounds like it's about to give you a melody.
It's not as there's not a lot to it,
Yeah.
you know.
And they do use it well in the series. There have been
Mm-hmm.
moments where they've called that in and mixed it up with the the Enterprise music and whatnot. It's
Mm-hmm.
been really well orchestrated,
Mm-hmm.
extremely well orchestrated in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It's just I want something more in that theme song.
Yeah, you want something a little more like complexly melodic. Like,
Yeah,
give me a few more tones, give me a little more rhythm.
yeah,
Yeah,
some very
a little more hooky.
yeah.
I
So,
understand that. I
anyways,
understand that. Yeah.
the music didn't stand out for me in this episode of Lower Decks. It's not something that I caught.
I usually don't dial in on the music except for the opening. So this was the first time that I was like, oh my gosh, this is a really good music cue. So I really liked that.
Okay.
And I loved the appearance of someone from Eric's race. I love Eric's, and it was cool to see somebody from his species show up. So it was a direct nod to the animated series, which I thought was really cool. Which, I guess we can call the first animated series now. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but I thought it was interesting. It was a little more of where Mariner's character is and why she kind of plays things the way she does. Um, Her friend, the captain, is really poking at her.
Mhm.
They mentioned the Jellico or whatever, calling her a Jellico. But
Yeah.
which
That was a nice
yeah.
Easter egg. I
Yeah.
did
Well,
appreciate that.
and the thing is too with Freeman and everybody, the captain and everybody, on their secret mission, they wear those suits that
Yes.
Picard and
Uh-huh.
everybody wore in that chain of command when they were on their
Mhm.
secret mission. That was pretty great.
Yeah.
And in classic Lower Deck style, their top secret mission is stupid, which I love. Um, but she's talking to her about why she does things the way she does them. It gives a little more insight into her character, that she's kind of
Mhm.
figuring herself out and kind of, making sure she keeps the rank she keeps.
There's a post on the Daystrom Institute subreddit, which is a fascinating
Oh yeah.
subreddit out there.
Yeah.
But someone they're and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but they're just going into Mariner's aversion to command,
Hmm.
and the conclusion that they're coming to is based on the fact that she grew up as the child of two officer parents.
Mm.
So she's probably been in multiple situations where she didn't know if she'd see either of her parents alive again. And there I am quoting from the post by, let's see, what's this guy's name? Caffeinated Nebula on Daystrom Institute. Yeah, I love the usernames on Reddit. Sometimes they're pretty clever.
It's
But yeah, it's interesting to think about how her growing up as the child of two Starfleet officers would affect what she thought of as the responsibilities of a commander,
hmm
and whether she does or doesn't want to put herself in that position.
right. And is it fear of the risk,
Well, so
or
the post goes on to point out that in Temporal Edict, she argued with Ransom about who's going to fight to the death.
hmm
She didn't want anyone else to risk death.
hmm
In Cupid's Errant Arrow, she's concerned about protecting Boimler from possible danger and untimely death, like her friend Angie.
mm,
And in Terminal Provocations, she's furious with Fletcher's actions because he endangers everyone else rather than harmless fun.
mm.
So we're seeing some sort of a pattern where she's putting other people in harm's way, I think is her problem.
Yeah, or she doesn't want to put other people in harm's way, is what you're
Yeah.
saying. She feels like that she's trying to protect people,
Mhm.
and doesn't want to see she's and that's
She's in a position where she can take the risk herself
right.
instead of
instead of sending
Um,
somebody else to do it.
yeah. Which,
Yeah.
again, I can't take credit for, as pointed out by Caffeinated Nebula.
Well, Caffeinated Nebula, Janeway name that you have. Thanks for that. We appreciate it. And we'll put that that link in the description too
Yeah,
for
I'll
that article.
definitely
That's pretty
send you
cool.
the link for that.
But yeah, no, I agree, and I just think that's interesting. I think that's a good angle for this episode. But I can't get out of the episode discussion without mentioning Tendy's dog, which I love. The dog, Tendy's dog, the dog, and the whole concept. I think in this episode of being a freak, right, and being an outcast, and the feeling that we have for the majority of the episode that there are certain people who Starfleet would like to sweep under the rug because they don't belong or what have you.
Yeah, I just want to throw out there, like, I love the idea where it finally went with this.
Yeah.
And that it humanely treats these people really well.
Mm-hmm.
I did not like the bait and switch, because the whole time I'm thinking, no, Starfleet would be past this. The farm would be real. This is not right. And so just the bait and switch for comedic purposes just didn't land with me. I didn't care for the delivery at all.
Okay. Well, I can appreciate that. But I kind of liked it because I think there is, like, in the era of Star Trek that we're in, and especially with the greater role that Section 31 keeps playing. Like, what did they call it in this one? Section 14 or something like that. You know, was the
14D or something like that. Yeah.
The medical section, whatever. So it's kind of a Section 31 kind of feeling to it, and I think that's a difficult thing for a lot of people to deal with in Star Trek in general. Just that whole Section 31 thing, that there's a sort of darker underbelly to the Federation, and there again, I think it's thematically right for Lower Decks to say, you know, we're not going there. You know, we're going in a more positive direction. That's what they always do in the series. And I think it was I thought it was kind of cool where it looks like it's a more like Section 31 kind of thing, you know, like you might see in a modern Trek series, you know, where like, the Federation isn't everything it's cracked up to be, or Starfleet isn't everything they say it is. But then it actually is like, oh, actually it turned out all right, you know. And I don't know. I kind of felt like that was maybe a bit of a commentary on some of the darker places that Star Trek goes to these days. So, you know, I kind of liked that.
That's fair.
But yeah, I also love that. I believe one of the people who ended up at the farm was one of the salamander creatures from Threshold.
Yes.
Yeah. Which
I saw that and I'm like, oh, it's gonna bring back bad memories.
Bad memories. Yeah. So, you know, a farm that they're in is kind of a paradise, and Star Trek doesn't always do well with paradises. And that paradise narrative is linked to how Star Trek discusses Eden, which,
you know, we don't always have to do this like A to B to C to
come
B.
Come on, man. I'm
thing.
actually doing a transition. Let me finish it.
It's like so forced.
It's not. It was. I was doing great. That was perfect.
Were you though?
And yes, I think that was great.
I mean,
paradises and Eden. I mean, that's.
Well, all right, that's fine.
So let's talk about the Discovery episode, New Eden.
Point still stands.
Point still stands. All right. So so our main story. Let's get to the main topic, shall we?
New Eden. New
Old Eden. Why did we choose the title New Old Eden, Tim? Inform our viewers, our listeners.
I am tired and you listened to me.
Well, no, it's a new old concept. It's a new examination of an old concept, and of course, Eden itself is an old concept, but it's also an old concept in Star Trek.
Wasn't there an episode in TOS called Eden, right? Or
The Way to Eden.
Way to Eden.
Okay. And Eden is a very strong theme. In fact, it's one of the sections in the book is about Eden and paradise in the original series.
Mhm.
And but by the book I mean the Gospel According to Star Trek: The Original Crew, available
Indeed, by the
now.
book.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah. So that was a theme that is returned to a lot in original series, and I like the fact that they did this kind of an episode in Discovery, because they do kind of go back to the well in a lot of ways, like when they go back to Telosia, right? Or to not Telosia, to Telos 4, where the cage takes place.
Yes. Oh, I love that
And
episode.
that was beautiful. It was great. And of course, we're tying back to that era of Star Trek anyway, with Pike being present. And so it was really cool because the Eden theme starts in the cage. That's where Star Trek first talks about Eden and paradise, in that very first pilot episode, and even in the next pilot episode, Where No Man Has Gone Before. Gary Marshall, when he starts feeling all godlike and everything, he creates his own Eden. He picks his Eve in Dr. Daner, and he even has a tree that gives Kefarian apples. So, but anyway, with this episode, it feels more like a Star Trek episode like we've had before. It very much follows the pattern.
And I think this is sort of an answer to all the people that were complaining about um, Discovery not being Star Trek enough.
I think so. I think a lot of what goes on in season 2 is a response to that, for sure. Even though I feel like we had some very Star Trek episodes in
We
terms of
did. Yeah, they were
in
just
the first
hard to
season.
see if you weren't like. I feel like they were hard to see if you were looking to not find them. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I agree. I think there are a lot of people who, like with the Kelvin timeline, are so caught up in the difference in the aesthetic and the difference in some of the content, right? That they're just like, oh, this isn't Star Trek.
Right.
When really it is. Like, I was just looking at my chapter on Star Trek Beyond, and it's the longest chapter in that book, and it's dense. There's the reason it's like 6,000 words or whatever is because I couldn't stop finding things to talk about in the movie. And this is an era of Star Trek that a lot of people, the Kelvin timeline, a lot of people are like, oh, it's just noise and action and visual effects, and it's not about characters or philosophy or whatever. No.
Yeah.
Especially in Star Trek Beyond. They put there's so much to talk about in terms of character development and great Star Trek ideas and themes. It's just densely packed, and it's in there.
Absolutely. And one of my most, I don't know, favorite, but most meaningful Star Trek quotes comes from the very end of that movie where he's fighting, when
Krall.
Kirk is fighting Krull, and he says, "We change, we have to, otherwise we keep fighting the same demons." And I'm
Same
paraphrasing
battles.
here, same battles.
You almost, yeah, that's
And
almost
yeah,
exactly right.
that's absolutely a very Star Trek thing to
Yes.
say, and yeah, it's absolutely I think one of the most profound things to come out of the Kelvin timeline. Period.
I agree. I agree. I completely agree with you. And so, rather than get off on a discussion of Beyond,
Fair.
the thing I want to pull back to Discovery is it's the same sort of thing in Discovery, where things are so different aesthetically, and the stories are told so differently. It's hard to see that we're telling Star Trek stories either at length, stretched over several episodes, or in a particular episode, like Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad, or in The Butcher's Knife Cares Not for the Lamb's Cry and Choose Your Pain. It's a very Star Trek story about the tardigrade creature and how to handle it. And when Michael and Tilly set it free and all that, that's a very, very Star Trek story. There's even I forget the episode title, but there's even an episode in the first season where Michael and Saru go to a planet where the spores make you want to stay.
Yeah. That was for me. So like I'm one of those people who got caught up in the aesthetic the first time through. I watched the first 2 episodes, and I saw the Klingons, how they looked and how they sounded, and I just thought, no, this is not Star Trek. And so much other stuff. The way Burnham mutinies against her captain, and all this other stuff. I immediately, no,
Rejected
this is not Star Trek. And I think I stopped watching the series the first time of the first episode with the tardigrade, and I remember thinking at the time, okay, I can see where they're maybe kind of trying to get into the Star Trek groove here, but it was on my second my second run through the season when I hit that episode with the spores on the planet
Yeah.
that made him want to
Just
stay. Where
like
I'm like, okay, this is
it's
Star Trek.
yeah. Well, the thing is, it's revisiting a very specific thing. I mean, it's This Side of Paradise from the original series is basically the same idea, basically the same concept, and so that's sort of the vein in which New Eden sits, because it's another episode where we go to a planet, and of course we deal with the people in a village.
Mm-hmm.
We have an entire planet, but we go to one village. But there's actually a really good reason for that in this episode, because of the signal and where the signal's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So that works out really nicely. But yeah, we go to a planet and we find people who founded a religion and all that kind of stuff, and that's a very Star Trek sort of story. But I think
Mm-hmm.
it's told in a slightly different way. I think things happen a little differently than we might expect. Particularly in that, you know, when they see the building, right? When they see the church building, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's clearly a church, right? In the old,
Right.
in the American church in the Wildwoods kind of way.
Right.
And there's that moment, and there's sort of a running undercurrent or commentary on the idea that religion isn't quite as in fashion as it were,
Mm-hmm.
at this time in human history, which is an idea that Gene had. It's kind of baked into Star Trek, you
Right.
know.
Mm-hmm.
I think Deep Space Nine and Voyager and other things have tried to push a little more religious diversity. There was certainly religious diversity talked about in the original series, and so I think there's sort of a push toward that a little bit. I know they talked about on that Women at Warp episode that I talked about, I think last episode, about the women religious leaders in Star Trek. Um, they talked about this idea that, like, who decides that religion is no longer a thing?
Mm-hmm.
You know, who is this authoritarian who says no, we can't have religion anymore? And that's not at all the way it's envisioned. It's envisioned that, in Roddenberry's words, religion would fall out of fashion. But then he also had the idea that maybe people would do religious things, but essentially for purely humanistic purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Although that's, in Roddenberry's view, not separate from connecting with the divine. It's just a different kind of thing that isn't worship exactly. But anyway, but moving on, there's definitely that idea in there that, you know, Burnham refers to the building, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Pike says it's a church, Michael, you know, or it's a church, Burnham, or whatever. He says it's a church. She's like, right, you know, like she doesn't even want to say it, you know, and she doesn't even want to use the word angel to refer to the Red Angel,
Right.
being, and that's again her very strong naturalism, her very strong scientism, her very strong aversion, it would seem, to religious language, which is interesting in that she comes from a Vulcan background,
Mm-hmm.
because the Vulcans are a very religious people, and again the monoculture, but
Right.
the Vulcans are very religious.
Although I like where they another side tangent here. I like how they're kind of branching out the Vulcan culture into some logic purists and
Mm.
stuff like that. You know, some that are opposed, like they're isolationists, and
Mm-hmm.
I like that they're finally saying, look, logic can lead you to different conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
It's how you apply the logic that's important.
Right. Yeah, I like that too, and of course that was kicked off really in Enterprise.
Right.
And
And
I
I like
appreciate
that
that.
they're still going with that.
Yeah,
I feel like Enterprise is the black sheep, and I enjoyed Enterprise a
I love
lot.
Enterprise. Yeah,
So
it was
I'm
great.
glad that they're giving it its due.
And you know what? I was reminded of an Enterprise. No, it wasn't an Enterprise episode. It was a Deep Space Nine episode that I
Ah,
was reminded of with this. When I can't think of the name of it, but when Cisco and O'Brien were on that planet, and they had the sweat box and everything,
yeah,
and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
like this reminded me of that. But it's a much like gentler and more benevolent culture. And the interesting thing is, we go to this planet, and you know, they're actually humans,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting. But they've developed this religion, and we don't undermine that religion. We don't break that religion down. We don't try to free them from that religion, and it's good. You know, I don't think most of the
Well, I
Good.
think the thing was like in the episodes where they do try to undermine that religion, it's where the religion is being used to control people, right?
Yeah.
And I think you talk about this in the book quite a bit, that where it's, they're not challenging religion, they're
Hmm.
challenging the way the religion is being used to control people.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and in this one, it's not being used to control people so much.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that's true. I think some people have seen this episode and have felt a little threatened by it. I think,
Hmm.
and part of that I think is because like Jesus is in the window. And I'm talking about Christians,
Hmm.
particularly because that's who I've talked to about who've been uncomfortable with it. Jesus is in that window, and we see the Star of David. Like, it's very unusual for Star Trek to depict human religions very much at all,
Hmm.
much less to use religious imagery. I think this is the first time Jesus himself has actually appeared on screen in some form, an
Uh-huh.
icon, but still in some form. There's a picture of Jesus, um, and I'm pretty sure it's the first Star of David. And there were several other things in there, and the
Hmm.
mention of human religions. It happens, but not as often, not very often. There's
Hmm.
much more attention paid to alien religions than human
Yeah.
religions, in part because of that idea that religion would fall out of favor. When Pike and Owo and Michael are going into the church, Pike says, "Have either of you ever been in a church before?" you know
Hmm.
and Owo says, "No, my family are non-believers." And Michael says, "Well, I've read texts," you know
Yeah.
which I find interesting. Oh, and a little correction to what we said last episode.
Okay.
um, Pike's father was not a Methodist minister. He was a science teacher. I thought this was right. He was a science teacher, and also a teacher of comparative religion.
Ah, okay. My
And
mistake. I think I was the
what's
one that threw that out there.
Yeah, and I went with it because it sounded right, but it'd been a while since I'd seen this episode, and so
Hmm.
it was nice that this was the episode that referred to that, because I thought
Yeah.
I thought we might be wrong, um, but yeah. And so it was interesting because when he says that,
Hmm.
he says, well, it was a confusing house to grow up in,
Ah.
and and he and I disagreed on a lot of things. We disagreed on a lot of things.
Hmm.
So he doesn't say how he disagreed or anything like that. But
Right.
again, there's kind of that idea that sort of science and religion are at odds with one another in some way.
Hmm.
And that goes back to what I'm getting at, where Jesus is in the window, and that's why some Christians kind of feel a little uncomfortable at this episode, or might feel um, a little cringy, because there is a little bit of that sense that, in fact, the leader of that village says, "We don't need evidence; we have our faith."
Hmm.
Right? And there's that idea that, a little bit of that idea that we kind of turn reason and rationality off because we're religious,
Right.
and that's troubling, and that's problematic, and that's largely consistent throughout Star Trek.
Hmm. And I think that's what they do try to confront, or at least what Michael's trying to confront in this episode. It's not the faith so much as it is the turning off the reason.
Yeah, and I don't. Yeah, it comes from Star Trek's kind of grounding in sort of modernist viewpoints and things, and I would like to have seen them move beyond that a little bit,
Hmm.
in this episode, and by this time in Star Trek history. It would have been nice, to sort of go past that. And that's one area where, I mean, I think Star Trek is a lot more friendly to religion than people give it credit for,
Hmm.
as was Gene himself, even though he pretty much hated all religion. Not hated, but like, didn't trust it
Right.
for himself. He certainly conceded that intelligent people believe in religion, and a lot of the moral formation that he received, he ascribed to his childhood in a Southern Baptist church,
Hmm.
even though he did not believe in the tenets of that religion anymore. Um, and so, there's always space for religion in Star Trek, but there's also often, I think back to Who Watches the Watchers in Next Generation. There's also often that sense of religion and ignorance. And in fact, Into Darkness, when at the beginning in Nibiru, when the people of Nibiru see the Enterprise and they immediately draw it on the ground and start bowing down to it.
Mm-hmm.
That idea that religion is a way where people worship or explain what is unexplained, or will immediately worship something that is larger than them, and I don't think that's that doesn't seem to ring true to me in terms of just human nature.
I feel like the opposite. Like if people, they don't understand something and it's larger than them, it's bigger than them, they I don't know. I guess I just feel like, with cults of personality and
Yeah,
sports teams and all these other things that people just become religiously devoted to.
that's
And
true.
I'm thinking of our current political climate as well, without getting too much into
Right,
that. It's
right.
just
No,
people devote themselves religiously to something bigger than themselves, and they establish commandments and tenets, like a Texas Ranger fan shall not, or no, more appropriate, a New York Yankees fan shall not, date a Boston Red Sox fan. It's
right, right, right.
they've got these commandments and these traditions, and yeah,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it is kind
No,
of
I
human
mean,
nature to worship something that's bigger than you.
you're right about that, and I don't disagree with that idea. I mean, that's something I do talk about in the book as well. But I know we keep referring to the book; it's crazy. I swear it's not an ad, people. But that's something I do talk about in the book, that humans can be referred to as homo religiosus, right? Um, that we tend to, or I think other people use the term homo adorans. That human beings do tend to worship and do tend to look for something outside of ourselves to be a part of, and I don't dispute that in the least. Um, I think that is true, but I chafe a little bit against the idea that sort of the sole purpose of religion is to deify or explain the things we don't understand,
Mhm.
and that anything we don't understand and that's bigger than us is just automatically made into a god, especially if we're very primitive,
Mhm.
like the people on Nibiru. And I have trouble with that, and I felt a little bit of that in this episode. That this being comes and saves them,
Mhm.
and puts them and deposits them on this planet, and it's immediately a religious event.
Right.
It's immediately something supernatural,
And
and
I thought it was interesting that where they said they didn't know which religion to give it credit to,
yeah,
so they
yeah,
just kind of mashed them all.
yeah, which is odd. I don't really necessarily buy that either. It's like a lot of concepts in Star Trek. I don't know how much I really buy it, in terms of something people would actually do, but it's there for a purpose, right?
Mhm.
It's there to sort of to make a statement or to do something, and um, it's about the religious impulse, right? Which is a fine thing. There's nothing wrong with it, obviously. But at the same time, I think the character who is portrayed most as a person of faith is Jacob, who is the guy whose family has cultivated the radio signal
Mhm.
down in the basement of the church for so long, and just the idea that his family had to sort of keep their own faith, like this religious context that's created on the planet is so strong that there's not any room for reason and for science, because we don't have technology. And that, I think, was wrong too. I feel like the idea that science is so dependent on technology that we just can't have science if we don't have gadgets and gizmos. I
Right.
don't like that idea either. And I think Burnham really kind of points to that in a certain sense by saying, well, say that I believe in science, like that's my faith, is science. And I think that's great. I think it's great that she says that, because I think that's true of Burnham, and I think that's true of people in general who trust science above all else. That is an expression of the human religious impulse. That is an expression of faith, which is intrinsic to our humanity. We have faith in things all the time. We have faith in people and ideas, um, all the time. That's how we function. That's how we get up in the morning and do whatever it is that we do. We function by faith, no matter if it's what is generally thought of as a religious faith, or a faith in the supernatural, or a god or not. We sort of make a god. We sort of make a religion. We make a faith system out of whatever it is that we trust,
Mm-hmm.
because faith is trust.
Right.
Um,
And I think that's a key point that a lot of people they conflate faith with belief instead of faith with trust.
Faith with blind belief, I think.
Yeah.
There's a blindness to it. There's a sense of just like trusting something because you're told to trust it.
Right. And there's also this expectation that if you like to have faith means you can't question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is something that is a principle on which authoritarian religion functions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that Star Trek is very much opposed to.
Right.
And I think Christians should be opposed to that too.
I agree.
Because when Paul talks about being transformed by the renewing of our minds, he's not talking about brainwashing. He's talking about refreshing and renewing the way we think, and being open to whatever it is God's going to show us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to think in new ways, to let go of preconceived notions, and come to greater knowledge and greater understanding, not to be ignorant. I can't, and that's the struggle for me, and that's the conflict that I have as a person who loves and tries to follow Jesus. The conflict that I have with religion itself as a sort of structure. I don't. I understand Gene Roddenberry's desire to say, well, institutionalized religion or a system of a church is not a healthy thing. I can understand him with his background saying that, because the religion that he came from was very kind of oppressive and not open to inquiry. And he was an inquisitive person. and so that came to clash. And I just think, I got an email from somebody this week talking about their views on like Genesis and Revelation, their views on these things that are sometimes contentious about where we come from and where we're going, and interpretations of those books, and saying, well, don't be mad at me, basically, or like, I don't want to offend you, but I think maybe some of this stuff is metaphorical, and I think maybe this stuff is misunderstood, and I don't think you have to believe in these things as literal historical events in order to be a Christian. And they were kind of not apologizing for it, but just kind of like, hey, I'm just going to tell you, I'm just going to come out and say this, which I thought was really, it shouldn't be a brave thing, but I thought it was a brave thing, a courageous thing to say that, because they did feel like, I don't know, you might be unhappy with me for saying this. And I was like, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's awesome. Keep questioning, keep asking questions, and keep looking, because if the Bible really is as important as we say it is, then we need to understand it for what it is, and understand it as best we possibly can. And if its original context is something other than a religious or an interpretive context that we've laid over it, we need to know that. We need to understand that. And we need to find, let our minds be transformed by that discovery and discovery. and learn more and grow more. And we shouldn't feel like we have to apologize for inquiry. Because I think intellectual pursuits are necessarily spiritual pursuits. That's something that's at the core of everything that I do, and that helped me to see things in a new way when I was coming back to Star Trek. That sort of worldview conversion that I had was it in part that intellectual pursuits are necessarily spiritual pursuits. That how we think about the world affects how we engage it, and that speaks to and forms and shapes the condition of our souls. And that's a great thing. It's a big thing. It's an important thing. So I feel like there are still vestiges of that in this episode. I wish they weren't there, but I do feel like the episode is a little more positive toward religion than we often see. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we don't always see negatively portrayed religions in Star Trek, but we do tend to do a lot of tearing down of false gods and false religions in Star Trek,
Yes.
which is a good thing,
Right.
because we should be interested in testing and approving and looking and seeing what, you know, what is good and praiseworthy and what is not. You know,
Mm-hmm.
what is truth and what is error. We should be watching out for that.
Yep.
There's no reason not to. There's every reason that we have to. But I liked also that that Jacob's faith was rewarded. That Pike came to him and said, "Yeah, you know, you're right. You're absolutely right. We are who you said who you think we are. The story is what you think it is." And you know, his you know, Lord haste the day when my faith shall be sight. You know, his whole family's faith, you know, was vindicated in that. And what's he going to do with that power cell that he used to turn the church lights on? It's nuts, because this power cell is evidence that his faith is correct,
Mm-hmm.
right? That we really do, that the Earth still is there, and that people do travel and whatever. Is this going to violate the Prime Directive eventually? Maybe it is, but you know, he uses the evidence of his faith to illuminate the church where everybody else's faith is housed.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, that was a very touching moment.
Yeah, yeah. And this is the thing, like, we look at the Red Angel and we look at these moments in Star Trek, as we get into these stories with Pike and everything, and we get into these stories with the Red Angel, we keep talking about faith. We keep bumping up against, especially because Michael is such a strict rationalist, such a strict naturalist, and is such aversion to religion. We keep bumping up against that because Chris is much more open to faith and seems to have some vestiges of that within himself, or some openness to faith. He knows enough to say, and also with you, when somebody says peace be with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
We'll get to that in a second. I want to make a comment on that, but and he talks about, and he quotes some I think he quotes scripture at some point, and I've lost it right now in my head, but the point is, what was the point? I gotta say, but the point is that we talk about all these things like religion and faith, and yet the Red Angel turns out to be Michael's mom and Michael herself.
Mm-hmm.
The inhabitants of this planet have a religious faith regarding this Red Angel, but the sort of naturalistic explanation, the rational, if you will, scientific explanation that Earth was not destroyed and all that, and that part of their narrative is false, that turns out to be real. But I want to say that it's not about, let me try to put this the right way. The Red Angel can be explained through technology and through human action. That doesn't make it less of a miracle.
Right.
When we get to the end of this season and we see everything that everybody worked through and all the things that had to happen and had to come together for this to work the way it works in a sort of causal loop. And it's not unlike the gymnastics that happen in the first Kelvin timeline picture to get our people into their right places, even in this wrong time, even in this different alternate universe. That's not just a purely, I don't think there is a purely natural event. The will of God and the movement of God is not separate from natural things. We talked, I think last week, about evolution, and that evolution doesn't disprove God. Evolution is an amazing system, an incredibly well-designed system. Mm-hmm. It's not random. It's and neither is this whole universe. It's not random. None of it is random. Oh, I hit my mic. None of it is random. It's all so incredibly well ordered, and that's miraculous. You know, an actual angel, or is there a difference between the red angel and an angel that would be a messenger from God? Is God not sending a message through Michael as the red angel, through Michael's mom as the red angel? Could we not say that this is a divine purpose working itself out through human agency? Why not? Why can't it be? You know, you hear all these stories of people who encounter angels and they're like, this person came up and helped us and it was great, and then they seemed to disappear and we didn't see them again. Ooh, maybe it was an angel. Yeah, maybe it was. Maybe it was an angel sent from heaven. Maybe it was a person doing the work of an angel. It doesn't matter. It's still miraculous, and it's still worth believing in. There is a something moreness to our existence, whether you come at it from a scientific angle, which is not an irreligious angle, or you come at it from a religious angle, which does not have to be an unscientific angle. No matter how you approach it, when we thoughtfully engage who we are and what our place is in the universe, that's the miracle. All right.
Well said.
Sorry, I just kind of ranted on this one.
No, that's fine. we are a little over time.
I'm sure we are.
That's fine.
And that's okay. That's okay. I can work my editing magic anyway. But okay. You know, we did this episode specifically. It was not something that I planned to do. You have been bugging me about it for weeks.
Yeah, because I know of this theme and how much you riff on it.
Yeah.
When I saw this episode, I immediately thought, oh, I can't wait to hear what Kevin has to say about it.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate that. And you're not the only person who's been bugging me to do the episode. So it's definitely by request that we're doing this episode. But I'm glad we are, because it really does situate Discovery in the context of Star Trek's larger discussion of religion, which, as I mentioned at the top of the episode, or at the top of the discussion, goes back all the way to the beginning of Star Trek itself. It's to reuse a metaphor baked into Star Trek. Star Trek is about everything that religious thinking is about, and spiritual thinking is about, and supernatural ideas are about. It's about all that, because it's about what it means to be human. And in terms of Eden's stories in Star Trek, this is an Eden where the paradise isn't undermined, I don't think. Not completely. So I think that's interesting too. And folks, if you want us to explore more in this episode, or if you want us to explore a different episode or something like that as we're leading into season 3 of Discovery, or if there's something else in Discovery you want us to talk about, hey, send us an email, talk to us on Facebook, talk to us on Twitter, connect. Let us know that's what you want to, that's what you want to hear, because man, I'll do it. We're open to this stuff, and there's probably more we can talk about just in this one episode. Somebody emailed me a while back, and I'm gonna just kind of paraphrase what they said, because they were asking what I thought Star Trek's view of the end times is. Speaking in context of Revelation, which, by the way, Revelation as end times, end of all things, end of time, end of the earth, whatever, is only one way of interpreting Revelation. It's not the only way by any means. There are plenty of other ways to read Revelation, and I think it's good scholarly work to talk about what else this might mean and how we might look at it. And what flaws there might be in ways we have been looking at it. So the question was just, how is Revelation reflected in Star Trek, or not really, but really, how are end times? What does Star Trek say about the end times? Mm-hmm. And I really feel like there are no end times in Star Trek in terms of an end of human history. Obviously, from a scientific perspective, at some point the human race will end. At some point, the planet Earth will end. At some point, the solar system will end, because our star will die. Assuming the universe goes on that long. I mean, depending on what you believe about the end of this world, or the end of the Bible, or the end of time, maybe that's not a thing that will happen. I don't know. I don't know how it's all going to work. All I know is that God redeems absolutely everything. That's all I know. Is that I think that's what the point that the scripture comes to, is that through Christ God redeems absolutely everything, and so I don't think there's much Um, there may be some episodes that deal with apocalyptic narratives. And apocalyptic, again, is a misapplied word. Apocalypse just means a revealing, an unveiling. And it doesn't mean destruction. It doesn't mean end of the world. It doesn't mean end of time. It doesn't mean any of that. But in the sort of common use of apocalyptic, right? Um, it's Revelation is apocalyptic literature in that it is an unveiling, a revealing, a prophetic unveiling, revealing. We talked about different kinds of prophecy in previous episodes. But I think there may be some alien cultures. Well, certainly I'm thinking of like Devil's Due from Next Generation.
Sure.
Devil's Due is a again a monoculture that has this end times prophecy of this devil-like being coming back and making good on the deal.
And don't the Klingons have some sort of belief that Kahless is going to return, or?
Yep, absolutely. There is a return of Kahless in Klingon religion, which, does it happen or does it not in Deep Space Nine? Because we have the Kahless who does return, who turns out to be, spoiler alert, the 25-year-old spoiler alert, but who turns out to be genetically created by the Klingon High Council to try to unite the Empire. Is that the return of Kahless that was prophesied or not? Like I was saying earlier about what's miraculous and what isn't. It is definitely something that comes up in some of these religious conversations, and usually, like in Devil's Due, it's kind of undermined,
Well, I feel like the newer Treks are starting to dip their toes, especially in Picard. When you look at that android AI apocalypse that they're trying to usher in, and that the Romulans are trying to prevent, and when you look at the end of everything that Discovery is trying to trying to get to, sort of a post-apocalyptic, everything's been wiped out sort of a setting. So I feel like they are starting to dip their toes in that. They haven't really established, I think, a whole lot of what they think about that. But I feel like they're setting the groundwork to start exploring that.
Well, and it's a type of narrative that's returned to frequently. And as you mentioned those things, and very good points bringing that up. Excellent. Thank you, because I would have totally skipped over that. But also in the story that we tell in Star Trek Next Generation, in Encounter at Farpoint, about how humankind got to where they are, they've gone through what they refer to as World War III. And World War III is often kind of how people view, like, oh, that's when the end times will come and stuff. And so those kinds of narratives do exist in Star Trek, and they are interesting, and they function in different ways. But I just want to say, again, like I talked about at the top of this segment, that Revelation isn't just about destruction. It isn't just about the end of time or what have you. That the point of Revelation, I think, as best I understand it right now, I must say I am still exploring the whole concept of eschatology and all that stuff. Is something that I don't get into a lot, and so I'm still wrestling with it like I am with so many other things. And I encourage our listeners to do the same. Always wrestle with your beliefs. But I think the upshot of Revelation is that God gets what God wants, that God restores all things. And I've always felt, and I talk about this in the book, but I've always felt that Star Trek, that Gene Roddenberry's idea of Star Trek, this world where there's no hunger, there's no disease, there's no war, and as he told Jonathan Frakes, and all the children know how to read, this place, and again where there is no religion, it sounds like a John Lennon song, but it's the culmination of the gospel, just maybe without the gospel, or at least without the gospel as we understand it, although Star Trek is replete with Christ figures. So I think Star Trek itself is about an ideal and a future for humankind that is not unlike the one depicted in Scripture. And I think that is the most important way in which Star Trek reflects Revelation, or when Star Trek reflects the end of all things, because it does put our minds toward what the world looks like when God gets what God wants, what the world looks like when all things are made new, you know.
Mhm.
And I think that is the importance of that idea, is that we keep it in our minds when we think about the kind of world we want to make, the kind of world we want to contribute to, the kind of human beings we want to be and encourage other people to be, and whether our actions are leading toward that end goal or not. Are we making this place? What are we doing with what our master has left behind for us? Are we investing what's been given to us, or are we burying it in the ground and waiting for the day the master returns? Right? Are we keeping that? Are we investing it? And are we multiplying what God has given us until that day when all things are made new? And that's the call that Jesus gives us. And that's the call I think that Star Trek helps us to focus on as well. So good question. Thank you for asking. And I hope that gives you some kind of answer. Okay, fantastic. This has been a good episode. It's been fun.
It has been.
Yeah. What's on the schedule for next week, Tim?
Well, it looks like next week we're going to cover episode 8 of Lower Decks. I have no idea what the title is, and whatever else comes up. Hopefully some listeners will send in some questions and some suggestions that we can dive into.
Yeah, I will admit, this New Eden thing kind of came at us, and we don't really have much of a plan for next episode, so now is a good time to come in and tell us what you want to hear more of. I think we'll definitely explore more of Discovery. That's our whole goal during this period, is to explore more of Discovery. So we'll do that. Just how exactly, you'll have to find out next week. So we hope you'll join us for the episode next week and maybe help us decide what it is. So in the meantime, please like, share, comment, subscribe, and rate. And if you're on YouTube, please ring that bell. Also, send us your questions, as we've been saying, Gospel According to Star Trek on Twitter and Facebook, or gospeltrekpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to discuss your question on the show. So Tim, do you have anything else to say to the folks at home?
Nothing comes to mind.
that's because we're low on time. So that's going to wrap it for this edition of the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. We thank you so much for being with us, as always. And until next time.
I'm Tim Van Orden.
That was your cue, dude.
Yeah, I spaced.
That's right. And I'm Kevin Cedis. And as Jesus said in John 10:10, live long and prosper.
See you next time.